As you may know, the proper show, Ed, and Eddy, had been running for a very long time. However, between October 7th, 2003 and October 21st, 2003, episode 34 was accidentally released 1 week before it was scheduled to. It was also known to some around the office the primary writer had been sick with the flu, and instead of going on to make episode 34, the show was supposed to replay episode 1 at 5 a.m. Eastern. People reported very disturbing new episode premiering on Cartoon Network. Some children were uncomfortable enough to see it. Apparently, the quality of the episode was mediocre, and when it went to the regular standards, the animation was choppy and the sound constructed and very muffled. Reports of a line running up and down, similar to crappy VHS tapes we received. The scenery was also described as overwhelming, dark, and depressing, without changing props and other background objects storming looking. The characters behaved oddly. Instead of the normal goofy hijinks-inspired personalities, viewers complained that they seemed extremely agitated, gratuitously hateful towards each other, and constantly began sobbing after the lines. The protagonist also had a very bad lisp, and of course no one knows why. But he spoke in a very weird tone, and that further bothered the audiences. I was one of the viewers. The episode began with Eddie walking down the street with Ed, and I noted that Ed was missing. But then there was a regular shot coming from in front of the two of them, walking towards the viewer. Eddie, was wearing the angry look when he sometimes does when something goes wrong. His eyes were red around the ears, and Ed was around absolutely forlorn and practically dragged behind Eddie, his tears in his eyes, which were both lazy, and then looking at the opposite towards the directions. Kevin in the series was the antagonist, riding his bike at the opposite of the Eds. Towards them, the shot became blurry and low moans were coming from Eddie before Kevin hurt them, which never happened because the screen went black. The screen then snapped back to Kevin and was heading towards Eddie, and the view was so blurry at the time, all I saw was a green blob heading towards the yellow one. Again, the low moan, this time it could be sound like a microphone was broken, and loud static came, greatly overshadowing the moan. The claymation sequence of Double D sweeping into Eddie's bed came up. Honestly, it may have been just the weird abruptness, but I jumped and shivered. Waking up and getting out of bed, he moved oddly around the circular room, the fast pitter-patter of footsteps only being the audio. The steps were very clear, and I was shown a bird's-eye view of scampering around the room. There was no visible doors. Ed began searching, sounded like a fish or cat, and then he moved wildly around the cell room, faster and faster, until he began blurring again, the purple room's color swallowing a now orange blur. The extreme close-up of Eddie's front door sat, absolute silence for a maniacally long time, for at least 2 minutes, dead silence, and a door. Next we see Jimmy and Sarah at the doctor's of some sort, some probably oral. Jimmy obstructed in a view by a hanging lamp, but is crying loudly with Sarah trying to comfort her with the unusual worn fashion. Now, it hurts, Sarah, it hurts. Suddenly the door to the room is smashed open by a new character, a dentist. His face wasn't shown because he was tall enough to be cut out of the shot. Sarah was escorted out of the room, Jimmy was shown, and his headgear was all mangled, and up front bent upward, stretching to his very hip for the very tearing proportions. The front of his gums were trickling blood, and his teeth were missing. The disturbing part was he lost both of his limbs, apparently, and sat in a paralystic. I almost cried when it came to conclusion, and the others beating him up, and bent his headgear. The camera stayed on his mangled face for about a few seconds, and then a still picture was shown, silent as ever. Commercials then came on. We were instantly assaulted with a very hairy Ralph in the darkened shed of this fisting cow repeatedly. The visual groups gets blurry again and the scene pans out. Naz is reading a magazine on her couch, and the quality was now perfect. Eddie is now alone, without Ed, and the quality declines much worse and he is walking. The sun now gained light in the mood of someone he smiles, and then begins running. The door is shown again, and we see through Eddie's eyes as he reaches out and opens it. His house was nice and bright, but a very badly played violin was blaring, the only audio on the screen that would make Sid way for the house. Eddy opens the door to his room. Johnny is then shown under Naz's couch cushion. As he crawls out on all fours in a kinematic way, it pops up behind her, still obvious. I laughed because someone forgot to draw his eyes, and I thought of a mole. Suddenly I stopped laughing when he started swallowing her head, in still a cartoonish fashion, of course, but this was different. He and she stayed like this until she started kicking and struggling. Johnny had held her until she went limp, and zoom on the face to reveal a small human eyes that were extreme realistic. Double D was then laying on Eddy's floor, no longer in claymation. The camera then showed Eddy's house for the remainder of the episode, about 3 minutes, and the next program began on the spot. And that, my little pretties, was Ed, Edd, and Eddy Lost Episode, and Ed, Edd, Eddy Lost Episode Creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story? This is actually a pretty well-made creepypasta. I am really amazed of how this pasta went out. This pasta, I think this might have been written, I guess. This is actually, to be honest, I know I'm kind of lost for words at one point because of how good this story is. But I am going to say this right now, that this story was actually pretty good. Now, I really do like how that story had a pretty good concept for what this is. Now, I'm definitely going to have to say that this story was a pretty good pasta for what this one is. Now, I definitely have to say that I actually heard some narrations of this story, and yeah, I actually wanted to go ahead and give it a narration. So, before we get started, I want to say I don't know who the original author is, as I can't seem to find the author's name anywhere. So, if I do find out who the original author is, I'll be sure to give him or her proper credit. So I guess with that being the case, that being said, this is actually one of the fewer Lost Episode creepypastas that did incorporate a few cliches, but the author actually know what he or she was doing and sat there and make it believable. So I know this is like an older story, so I'm guessing this might have been written around 2012 or maybe 2013. I'm not really sure. But it might have been written around there. So I definitely would have to say that when I first saw this story, I really wanted to go have a look at it. So I decided to have like take a look at it. And I gotta say that this story was actually pretty well made in detail. It's a pretty good pasta. So I definitely have to say that I really do like how this pasta went out. It's believable. It's really well made. It's just, pretty cool for what this story is. I really have to say that there's definitely like a lot of concept within this story. So I definitely have to say that this story actually provided pretty good detail. But of course, to be honest, everyone really liked how this pasta went out. I really do find this pasta to be, enjoyable and well made. Now, don't get me wrong, I remember watching Ed, Edd, Eddy back when I was a kid. I remember to be completely that. I really do like how this story is going out, but of course, this story was actually a pretty well made in detail. I actually really find this story to be amazing, really well made in detail, and I really do have to say that I really do like how the concept of this went out. It's a pretty good Lost Episode story. It's not like hyper-realistic blood, gore, everyone dying at the end. And now this I could definitely say that this story actually provided pretty good detail for what this is. So I definitely have to say right now that I really do find this story to be enjoyable. It's a very, very enjoyable story. But of course I really have to say that this story actually was realistic in a sort of way. I could honestly see this being realistic. It's a pretty good story. I really do like how this went out. It's a really well-made story. Now, I think I remember narrating this sometime back, I guess in I think it might have been 2019. Yeah, I started narrating this back in 2019, so But I would like to see, I was trying to look for some good Eddy creepypastas. When I saw some on Geoshia Wiki, I definitely have to say that the story itself was kinda, well, I found a few of them that were cliched, as cliche can honestly get, so that's obviously one of the reasons why I was, very surprised at how this story was. Definitely would have to recommend that the story actually provided pretty good detail. I really do like how this story was amazing. It's a pretty good pasta. I really have to say that I really do like how this story went out. It's a pretty good pasta, really enjoyable. So it's actually one of the fewer lost episode pastas that we're sitting here, but I really like how this one is. So I definitely have to say that this story actually provided pretty good detail. And it's believable to extent because the author of this story really knows what he or she was doing. So I definitely would have to say that this story was amazing, really well done in detail. And I do like how the grammar was pretty good in this story, and that's a very good thing. It's a pretty good concept for what this is. I definitely really found this story to be really enjoyable. So I definitely really like how this one went out. So I guess with that being the case, that being said, I'm going to sit there and kind of wrap up the review because there's not really much to, say, but I really do like how this story went out. I don't see anything wrong with this story, but I can definitely say that right now that this story actually was a pretty good pasta. Really do find a good enjoyability of it. So I definitely have to say this story, you should really check it out if you guys really want to. But anyways, I guess with that being the case, that being said, like I'm gonna say right now, and like I always continue to say, this is simply my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be a 10 out of 10. It's a great Ed and Eddy creepypasta. I really do find this story to be enjoyable. There's definitely lots of time and effort into it. I really do find this story to be amazing. Really well done. So anyways, with that being the case and that being said, what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what we have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section down below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode, and if you happen to be brand new here on this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Do not forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload, so then you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.